Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight or direct your paths. Right, got that? I'm going to read it in the Message version. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen to God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Now, Eugene Peterson was my supervisor in some of my studies overseas, so I knew him quite well, the man who wrote the Message version. And, I reckon that is a pretty, even though it's put into today's English and he's tried to explain it for us, it's actually pretty accurate for the meaning of the Hebrew. And I teach some of this from Hebrew in my classes. I'm going to read it again. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who'll keep you on track. Right, we're going to come back to that a bit later. Story number 1. Now, first of all, I have to give apologies to the ladies who were at the lunch when I told some of my stories. Who's here from there? Is there a few of you? You got good memories? Because I can't even remember which stories I told you, but I am absolutely sure that at least one of the stories you will have heard before, but the rest haven't. So is that okay? So I want to begin at the beginning. Well, sort of at the beginning. It's not quite at the beginning, but the time when I really met Jesus. When I was on a children's camp, I was invited there by somebody. My mother warned me, she let me go. We went away for a week, but she said, watch out if they bring the Bible out, because anybody who brings the Bible out is a fanatic. So don't listen to them if the Bible comes out. Right, got that? Then we'll send you on the camp, because I was so shy that they thought, well, perhaps I could do with a little bit of social help, socialising. So they let me go. Well, they did bring the Bible out. And I first sat as far away as I could. And then I got a little bit closer, because what I was hearing was not like Mum was telling me at all. In fact, it was, I got the different impression. He was talking about loving God, a God who was loving, a Jesus who was loving. I don't know that I knew much about the Holy Spirit at that stage. And I saw love in the faces of the teachers that we had who led us. We had fun activities too, but actually they were not as important to me at the time. And at the end of the week, on the Friday, we were asked to draw a picture of Jesus on the cross. And this is just after they told us, it's the very first time I'd ever heard it, that Jesus died on the cross for us and that he was risen from the dead. That's an amazing story. We celebrated it here now. We celebrate it each week in a lot of churches and in our church. I was drawing my picture. I got my pencils that they get us in the paper, etc. I drew a little picture. And then I thought I'd better check whether I've got everything. So I looked at the picture from the bottom and my eyes went up. Have I got everything right? Yeah, I've got 2 feet. I got, all that. And got up to the face. But I didn't see my face that I'd drawn. Just above my picture, I saw the face of Jesus looking at me with amazing, overwhelming love, like I had never ever in my life experienced. My mother didn't know how to give love, didn't know how to receive love. It wasn't something she really understood. And this face of Jesus, and he was looking at me. He was looking right at me. And I thought, who am I? I'm just a little kid. I don't even come from a Christian family. I'm an outsider. And here's Jesus looking at me with this amazing, overwhelming love. other words that came to mind. I'm telling you this story as it was to me when I was 11. And then I suddenly remembered that I had missed something out in my picture. I had forgotten to put in the holes in the hands and in the feet, because I remember they told us about that. So I thought, oh dear, I'll have to go and put those in. So I did. I left the face of Jesus and I went and got the red pencil, red for blood, because I knew there was blood coming out. So the first one I did was this hand here. So I got my pencil and I did a stab on the page. And I felt at that very moment a stab go through my heart. And that stab told me that I was one of the people responsible, because what was happening was the stab, my sin. This is the first time I've recognised, after things they were telling me, that I was a sinner. That went through my heart because I had caused Jesus pain. In that stab going there, it went through me. And then I finished putting the stabs in. And then I thought, well, I've got to go and check now. I've got to go and look to see the picture. But, will I find the face of Jesus again? And then I thought, what will he think of me now? What will Jesus think of me now that he knows that I am one of the people that was responsible for putting him on the cross? That's how I thought. Of course I know now. He knew all along. But I'm just telling you, was absolutely knew all of this stuff. And I thought, do I want to see the face of Jesus? Because what if he knows everything now, knows that I'm a sinner and I was one of the ones who put him there, what will he do to me now? He won't be loving me, that's for sure. But I was curious. I wanted to know what he would think now that he knew. And I dared to gradually look at my picture from the feet going up. And then the face of Jesus appeared. And what was his expression? Can you guess? The same amazing, overwhelming love, even though he now knew that I was a sinner and that I had caused this. And that was a moment I understood for the very first time his forgiveness for me. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? Now, you've all got your own stories, and you might think that's a weird story, and I've been very hesitant to tell that publicly, because it is a bit unusual. It's not that unusual if you start talking to people from other countries who've come from persecution, who come from places where their families don't know Jesus. And I think God is so merciful when you get people that, come from Muslim backgrounds, come from Hindu backgrounds, come from, anti-Christian backgrounds like I came from. And I was the only Christian in my extended family for a very, very long time. And God is very merciful. And sometimes he gives, some kind of dramatic help, because I didn't have anyone else to talk to. So that's story number one. So what's the main thing that we can be grateful for there? I think you could say it, couldn't you? Love. His love. That's the basis of our trust. I just have to insert this little story, half story in. I have a cousin who was a Catholic priest and monk. And when we compared notes, we didn't meet him in England until we went to live there. But when we compared notes, we found out that he entered the monastery at exactly the same time and day and year as I met Jesus here. And we had a little when was it, 60 years after that happened, we got together on Zoom and we compared notes and said, what did it mean then and what does it mean now? And what he said to me was this, to us, was this. He said, I, at that stage, just committed my life to the church. But he said, you went to the heart. And you found Jesus back then. And he didn't. But he said, that is now what he's doing, is finding Jesus. He died this last year. But I know that he found Jesus, even though our journeys came in very, very different paths. Let me read those two verses again. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Why? Because of his love. And it's his love that gives him that trustworthiness. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. He's way bigger. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Now, do you think that God was going to let me go after, showing me all of this amazing revelation? Do you think so? You're not sure. Thank you. There's one or two people who do, who have got it. When I got to be time to go to university, end of grade 12, I was living in Sydney. That's where I grew up. And I applied for and was accepted into Sydney University and another university in a country town called Armidale. Some of you might have been through it. It's usually cold. And in the highlands of northern New South Wales. And my parents knew about this, and then they decided you may not go to Armidale. And if you want to go there, we will not pay for anything. I got a scholarship, a Commonwealth scholarship. But because there was a university where I lived in Sydney, I didn't get a living allowance. I just got the fees paid. Whereas Stuart, who I met at that university that we actually went to, he got a living allowance as well because he was from a country place. So they said, no, you may not go. And I knew that I had to obey my parents. And people at church told me, you have to obey your parents. If they say no, that means no. That's it. So I accepted it. And even though at times it wasn't easy being at home, but I accepted it. This is settled. And so I rested in that, and so I made plans to stay in Sydney. But I was reading the Bible one night. The Bible can speak, can't it? I was reading from Acts chapter 9, and there were Jews that were after the Apostle Paul. And they were wanting to get him. Well, they had a reason, of course, because Paul had been murdering, or part of the thing to set up, to murder Christians. So, you'd be scared of him, wouldn't you? If he walked in here, some of you would be scheming and, you'd be trying to get him out the door and various things. Well, they really wanted him out completely, preferably dead. So what did they do? They were trying to get in, but he had some friends, and they put him in a basket and they let him down over the wall. Can you remember reading that story in Acts chapter 9? And he managed to escape. So that was good. I was reading this story, and God spoke to me, and he said, and I was actually quite used to God speaking to me in clear words. God doesn't speak to everyone in clear words. He has different ways of communicating with all of us. So don't get worried if your stories are quite different from mine. And God spoke to me, and he said, just as Paul's friends made a way for him to escape, God was making a way for me to go to Armidale, not to Sydney. Now remember, my parents weren't going to let me go to Armidale, and I had no money. I had about $112 in the bank. In the first week, I was going to have to pay $600 and something for residence fees. And then, of course, you've got to buy textbooks and toothpaste and all that stuff. So, what would I do? And anyway, God was pretty annoying, I thought, because I wanted to go to sleep. And I wasn't going to sleep. I would turn the light on, then I'd turn it off, and it was on, off. And nothing was working, because he was annoying in my head, telling me that, he was making a way for me to go to Armidale. I couldn't see how that would work. And I thought, this goes against what he says about honouring parents. So that didn't make sense to me. So then eventually I got up out of bed. I stood on the floor with the light on, and I said, okay, God, if you're speaking to me, then I will go on 3 conditions that you need to fulfill. I'm not saying that you should speak to God like this. I'm just telling you what I said. This is just me. Nobody taught me the proper way to talk to God, so I just do it. Right? Well, it probably comes out of coming from a non-Christian family. So I said, okay, I can trust you for the money, but I don't expect that my parents could do that. Because if God says to go, then he has the responsibility to provide, doesn't he? So, okay, step 1, God, you will provide all the money I need for 4 years at university. Isn't that fair? If he says go, he's got to pay. So, I thought that was a pretty fair deal. And the second one is, God, you say that you've got to honour parents and obey them. And they're at the moment telling me I can't go. Okay, step 2 is you have to make my parents change their mind and let me go. Then I can go. That's fair as well, isn't it? And step number 3, make my mother forget how much is in my bank account. My mother was the money one. Dad didn't ever remember how much money there was or wasn't. So the next morning when I woke up, I had a really good sleep after that. I just went to sleep. The next morning, my mother was in the kitchen, as she always was, and I just saw her, and she said, I've just been thinking through the night, dear, that really it would be an excellent idea if you go away to Armidale University instead of staying in Sydney. And then I said, and she gave me all these reasons I didn't understand, but they made sense to her. And then she said, will you be right for money, dear? And I said, yes. I went out to the garage where my father always was, and he said just about exactly the same words. Also ending with, will you be right for money, dear? I said, yes. 2 weeks later, they drove me to Armidale University, dropped me and my goods, and went off on their holiday or whatever else they were doing. So there I was. This is Saturday, and Monday morning there was a Christian prayer meeting. That's when I met Stuart. And, I still know him, however many years later it is. 56 years later, it is, 56 and a half years later. So, but I didn't yet know many Christians. And how was I going to pay for all the things I needed? Because, the maximum I said was about $112 that I had in the bank. And what happened next, I still think is amazing. Every day between Monday and Friday that week, because Friday is when I had to pay the big bill, every day between Monday and Friday, there were envelopes put under my door with money in them. I still to this day don't know who put that in. for most of those. Now, how did they even know? I'm a brand new student at university. I haven't got to know many people yet. I haven't got to know anybody. Monday morning was the first time I met a few people at the prayer meeting, but I didn't tell them, anything. I knew Stuart for when I was at university, and until just before we were married, I didn't tell him that I needed money. I didn't tell him because I didn't want him to feel obliged to do anything. Now, eventually I worked out on one of the envelopes, I recognised the writing about 6 months later, and asked the person, did they put that money in? And yes, and that girl continued to do that for the next 4 years. So, I mean, she was just on a student scholarship. And the rest of them, the fact that they put money under the door that there were still other envelopes that came after that. But the first week, and so Friday, I had all the money I needed to pay cash for my residence fees. That's how I lived for 4 years. God can provide. And if God calls us to do something, He never calls without being willing to come with us and to provide. The two things go together. We know Jehovah Jireh, He's a provider. And so somehow or other, when I was 18 with very little teaching, I got that. Because that's the character of God. Now, nobody told me, I'd never heard any stories apart from Bible stories. I had a Bible and I went to Sunday school. But nobody told me how anything else worked because I didn't know other Christians. So I had the Bible and I thought, well, whatever it happens in the Bible, then that's how it is. That's how God relates to people. That's how people relate to God. And it worked. It does work. God is still around and God still does that. Years later when we were in Canada, and because God had said go there, that's another story, won't tell you the details, then we'd done the 2 years that we first planned, and then God said stay another 2 years to complete the next part of this training. But we had no money. I had a half-time job. A half-time job is not going to could not pay both rent and food, let alone anything else. But by this stage, I was used to the way God works. And so we didn't worry for those years, did we, Stuart? And we saw God provide. I mean, you don't get rich doing that kind of thing, but you have enough. Now, I just want to give a little word about here. I've got Mr. Treasurer sitting right down here. And does that mean that you can be as irresponsible as you like with money and expect God to fix everything? No. No, it doesn't. Now, I have prayed for a car 3 times, or is it 4 times? And a car was given to us within 24 hours. One was that evening and the others were the next day. And they were in situations, this is over a number of years, they were in situations where I always first ask myself the question, have we been responsible with the money that we have? Are we being responsible? Is there any way in which that needs to change, improve? That's question number 1. Because there's other parts of the Bible that tell us we've got to do our part. That's why we do need a treasurer. We have to do our part. But if God is calling you to do something that is outside the normal, and it is confirmed and it is consistent with the Word of God, and but there's checks and balances all around here. And if there's no other way to be able to raise that money, which in this case is with the cars, that was the situation. They were absolutely necessary. and there was no other way. Well, then God just provides. It's it sounds like, if you haven't experienced that, it sounds like, well, is that crazy? Am I just making this stuff up? No, I'm not making any of this stuff up. Stuart's the only person here who can verify that. But God is the provider. He is the provider. Not letting us off the hook for our part, but He is the provider. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. Now, story number 3. This is the last one. It's all right. I'm not going on forever. This is in Tasmania. 1985, we were doing Christian musicals around Tasmania. Does anyone have any vague memory of that? Back to the 80s? Oh, we've got one hand up at the back. And so we were leading a fairly large group, interdenominational group, and we were going around to different parts of Tasmania presenting this, various musicals. And in 1985, we were in Launceston. It was actually the end of the run, and we had presented the musical in various other places. And we were in Launceston, and we were all billeted by different families. Good Tasmanian hospitality. It really was. It was lovely. And we went to church on the Sunday morning with the family that we were staying with. And that was great. There was nothing particularly unusual about the church service itself and the way it was run. But it was during the singing of one of the songs that God spoke to me. The song was, "I will give thanks to thee, O Lord, among the nations." Does anybody remember that? It's a great song. I haven't sung it for a while, but it's a great song. And it was sung commonly in lots and lots of churches back then. So when we were singing that, and I can't remember if I was standing singing or sitting or what I was doing, and but during the singing of that song, I had pictures in my mind that I didn't put there, pictures interpreting the words of the song as we were singing them, and they were all there was God interpreting, showing me things. And basically, when we got to the end of the song, He said, right, as you have proclaimed the name of Christ around Tasmania, I am calling you to proclaim the name of Christ among the nations. And then He showed me a scene. It was in Fiji. It was outdoors, and there was me preaching. Now, 1985, I'd never ever to this point seen a woman preaching. And I certainly hadn't been preaching. Because women didn't do that then. Some of you can remember back to then. No, we didn't. And I didn't aim to do that either. I wasn't a feminist. I don't know that I am yet either. And I'm not, I'm just me. And there was me preaching in this Fijian village outdoors, and I saw the faces of 4 Fijian men very, very clearly. One was quite elderly, one was quite young, and the others were in the middle. And in this picture that I saw, there was an altar call given after I'd been preaching, and these 4 men came forward to respond to the gospel. Right? Now, the interesting thing was that these 4 men's faces stuck in my mind. I knew if I ever saw them, I'd recognise them immediately. Now, 7 years later, 1992, we had friends who were living in Fiji. Friends from here, but they were living in Fiji, teaching at the university there. One was, she was, and he was doing something else. And their kids were friends with our kids from here, and they invited us to come for a holiday. And at this stage, I was a minister in the Huon. So a lot of things changed in that time. And I was actually quite tired of, from preaching, because in the Huon you've got to preach several times every Sunday. It's not just once. And, you don't get relief like people do. Well, like I get relief now. And what am I trying to say? Yes. I said to God, if we go to Fiji for a holiday to see our friends, no preaching. Do you understand? God, I am tired. They're telling you I didn't really have proper lessons in how you're supposed to pray, so I just say it, I am tired. You understand that I'm tired. This is my holiday. This is a break from being a minister in the Huon. No preaching. Got it. God? Right. Okay, I thought I was settled in that case under that condition. We would go to Fiji for a holiday. So we went to Fiji, stayed with our friends. That was all very lovely. And then we went and stayed with this, in the Methodist deaconess house. Some contact person told us to stay there for a while, which we did. And so we were staying there, and I remember this night, I sort of struggled in the night. I was awake for several hours in the night because God brought those words back to him. And he said, you remember you said no preaching. What right have you got to say no preaching? So God and I had a little bit of a, back and forth here for a few hours, because I was still adamant that I was not preaching. This is a holiday. God, don't you get it? God did not get it. And so that was when I gave in and I said, okay, God, thy will be done. I remember saying those words. Because he is bigger than I am, and he has much greater understanding of the big scheme of things, not just my little bit here and how I feel. So that was during the night. During the day, the next morning, just a few hours later, we had to go to visit this island, and we had to go and buy a bunch of kava to take to the village, And this lady Marama was going to write us a letter to take with us on this boat, to just have it there in case, because she said, if you get into trouble, you might need to know the contact of a minister on the island. Okay? Fine. Thought that was all very innocent. But we had to go shopping for this kava and various other foods because there were no shops where we were going. So Stuart and I came back separately, from going to shops and getting things, and we met and we went ready to go on the boat. But then we went to pick up this letter from the lady to take to the minister on the island, and with her there stood two men in a cafe, and they were standing there, and she introduced me and she said, this is the Reverend Solomoni Tuimbua. And he shook my hand and he said, I'm very pleased to meet you. And he kept shaking and he kept saying, I'm very pleased to meet you. And I thought, why is he very pleased to meet me? And then he said, there's a mission on in the exact village that you're going to, on that exact island. There is a mission on. It starts tomorrow night. And I believe you will be the guest preacher. And I just had to say yes. And he said the theme of the mission is, thy will be done. Well, what could I say since I just said that to God? I had to say yes. So I did say yes. He said, well, I'll come tomorrow about 2:00 and, we can get ready for the mission. The mission is on at night. And anyway, so we thought, okay, we'll see him and we'll ask all the questions. How long should I preach for? What should my theme be? What else is, what's the order of service? And, all those sort of really, really, really important questions. And 2 o'clock came and went, 3 o'clock came and went, 4 o'clock came and went, 5 o'clock came and went, by which stage I thought, right, he doesn't want to get woman preacher. He's found a different guest preacher now. And this was his way of organising the mission. His way of organising the mission was to have prayer, where everybody speaks at once. And when we arrived, in fact, you could hear voices praying. And the person in this motel, which meant, you got a bed, and there was electricity on for 1 hour each night, generator. And so the motel man said, he said, there's a guest preacher coming. I didn't dare say, I think it's me. But there's a guest preacher coming, and they're all praying and everything. So that was his way of organising the mission. Then he went up to Fiji, to Suva, to the capital, to get the name of the guest preacher. And they said there wasn't anyone available. So he said to his friend Pedro, okay, we'll walk along the street and God will lead us to the guest preacher. That was his faith. He went in and saw Marama, and she was writing him a letter. That's who she was writing to. And so he put 2 and 2 together, and the letter said that also I was a minister from Tasmania. So it didn't take him long to make some connections, and there we were. So he came at 7 o'clock, and he said, come now, the mission is on now. And I thought, what about all my questions? Well, the questions never did get discussed. Obviously, they weren't of great importance to him. And so we followed him, the whole family. We had our 4 kids with us. We followed him into the village, which meant going over a bridge made of logs with a river underneath. And I'm really, really not very good at going over logs and staying, in the right position. But anyway, God must have helped us, because we all went over the logs and we all crossed the river and we all got to the village and, went through the little carver ceremony, clapping hands, whatever they had to do to welcome us to the village. We did all that. Then we got to the outdoor place. I've no idea why that night the mission was on outdoors. But there were hundreds of people sitting down outside. And so I had no idea. There was no translation, there was no English. I had no idea what the theme of the mission was, apart from thy will be done. I had no idea of what the people were talking about when there was a testimony given, and there were singing and talking and all of that. And then at some point I was told to speak. So I got up and did my speaking. He translated. And so I thought, this looks exactly the same scene as I had seen 7 years before. So then I don't know what I preached about, but anyway, all I felt was I have to open my mouth, God has set this up. And there was a strong sense of God being there. I felt almost like I didn't need to be there. I was given the privilege of witnessing what God was doing. But I did have to open my mouth when the time came. And I said things. I was only rebuked the next day because it was nearly an hour, and that's nowhere long enough. It should be 2 hours. So I had to make it longer the next night. At the end of what I said, this Reverend Solomoni Tuimboa, he gave an altar call. I didn't, because I don't believe in trying to force or make anything happen that you think God has said to you or has given you a picture or vision or something of. I don't think anything should be forced like that. Everything's got to be tested. And he gave the altar call. And then the most amazing moment was when I saw those 4 men. Those 4 men come forward. And they did. And then after that, there were 2 more. And then he said, well, now we need to pray for people who need healing. There were 6 people who came forward, and so he just ordered me to pray for them. He didn't say, what's your theology of healing or what denomination you come from or anything like that. He just said, you pray for them, you know. And so I just did. I sort of felt like it was almost superfluous. I mean, what did I need to do? Because God was there. And they all came back healed. The next night, obviously healed. And I did not. It was one stupid thing. I did not write down the particular sicknesses that they were, healed from. But they were all miraculous. What does that say? That story. It says that if God calls you to do something, He will enable you to do it. He will bring it to pass. You don't have to do anything except step by step living faithfully in Christ. You don't have to force anything. There's no way that I could possibly have arranged to have, a mission, to be speaking at a mission for a few nights in a jungle area in Fiji, not the towns. I couldn't have done it. I don't even know how you do it. God can do everything that He says He will do. And that's what I want to say. We are only called to trust in the Lord and to take one step after the other. Doing the ordinary things faithfully. Because we can't do the extraordinary things. I can't. And I don't know that anyone else here can either. But we know an extraordinary God. And if He says something, He will bring it to pass. Unless we go and crash out and, do something that stops it from happening. That is the nature of our God. Trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything on your own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do, everywhere you go. He's the one who will keep you on track. And I think many of you know that episode in Fiji was not the end, but we've been teaching on 5 continents and still do. But we've been physically present on 5 continents. We teach on 6 continents. God does and enables what He says He will do. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. That's sort of, very thoughtful presentation for all of us. I'm so glad that I pointed out Jeff there because it was your turn. Well, I'm mindful when we get Kathy back, it'll probably turn to me, so never mind. What a lovely way to finish, thinking at how good our God is. Well, as you know, we've been here at Howrah, we've been building up our music team. And one of the newest song leaders we have is our own Rudy. So I'm going to close off now and say, take it away, Rudy.
Let us stand for the final song. The heavens shall declare the glory of His name. All creation bows at the coming of the King. Every eye shall see,
Every eye shall see,
and every heart will know.
every heart will know.
Every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. See the coming of the King. Holy is the Lord. The heavens shall declare the glory of his name. All creation bows at the coming of the King. Every eye shall see,
Every eye shall see,
every heart will know.
every heart will know.
Every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. See the coming of the King. Holy is the Lord. See the coming of the King. Holy is the Lord.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and we'll be back here in about 10 minutes.